Chapter 1. The night everything broke. Emily Carter was only 19. She lived in Maplewood with her mother and father. They were gentle, loving people. Her father called her Sunshine. Her mother said, "You will make us proud one day." Emily believed them. She wanted to study business and open a small coffee shop. With her parents, life looked bright. One evening they went to her school. Emily had just received an award. She laughed. She hugged her mother. She said, "This is the best day of my life." Her father drove the car home through soft rain. Emily sat in the back seat, holding her trophy. Suddenly the light from a truck blinded them. There was a scream, a crash, and silence. When Emily opened her eyes, everything was white. She was in a hospital bed. Her arm hurt, but she didn't care. She whispered, "Mom, Dad." The nurse looked down and didn't answer. Emily felt her chest freeze. She kept saying, "Please tell me they're fine." The nurse only touched her shoulder and walked away. Emily turned her face to the wall and cried until her voice was gone. At the funeral, rain fell again. She stood beside two graves and held a flower in her shaking hands. "I'll do everything you taught me," she said through tears. But when the last guest left, she realized she had no one now. The house felt empty. The clock still ticked, but the world had stopped. A few days later, her Uncle Robert came. He wore a black coat and fake sadness. "Come stay with us," he said. His wife, Martha, nodded quickly. "You shouldn't be alone, dear." Emily thanked them. She wanted to believe they cared. For the first week, they were kind. Robert bought her medicine. Martha made soup. Emily thought maybe family still existed. But soon she noticed whispers at night, locked drawers, and small lies. One morning she heard Robert on the phone. "She's too young to understand." "The papers," he said. Emily froze in the hallway. Later she asked him, "Uncle, what papers?" He smiled coldly. "Nothing. You need to see." Days later, Martha told her to clean the dishes, then the floor, then the clothes. Emily obeyed without question. One evening she said softly, "I would like to continue my college." Martha laughed. "Call. You should learn to be grateful." That night, Emily found her father's old briefcase missing. She ran to Robert's room. "Where is Dad's file?" she asked. He turned angry. "Don't shout in my house." "This was my parents' house," she cried. He hit the table hard. "Not anymore. Everything is mine now." Emily stood still, shocked. "You took everything." Robert pointed at the door. "Get out before I call the police," she begged. "Please, I have nowhere to go." Martha said quietly, "Let her go. She'll learn." Emily walked out with one bag and her mother's photo. The night was cold. She sat near the gate for hours crying. "Why did you leave me?" she whispered to the sky. The next morning she tried to call an old friend, but her phone had no balance. She sold it for a few dollars to buy bread. The shopkeeper asked, "Are you okay?" She smiled weakly, "Just hungry." That night she slept at the train station. People walked past without seeing her. A child dropped a blanket near her. She wrapped it around herself and whispered, "Thank you, little angel." She looked at the stars and said, "Mom, I'll be strong. I promise." When morning came, she stood up, brushed her clothes, and took a deep breath. "I will find work," she told herself. She didn't know how, but she knew she couldn't give up. Somewhere a door would open. Somewhere someone would see her worth, and that is how her long, painful journey truly began. Like, subscribe, and share. Read this story and many more on our website, bookishenglish.com. Link in the description. Chapter 2. The House That Wasn't Mine Anymore. Emily spent her second morning at the train station watching people come and go. She held her mother's photo close and whispered, "I'll find a way." Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten properly for 2 days. A woman selling sandwiches noticed her pale face and gave her one for free. "You remind me of my daughter," the woman said. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. That small kindness gave her courage. She washed her face in the public restroom and started walking toward the city. Every few blocks she stopped to ask people, "Do you know any job I can do?" Some ignored her. Some smiled with pity. She kept walking anyway. By afternoon her legs hurt. She knocked on doors of small shops. One man said, "We don't need anyone." Another said, "You're too young." She thanked each of them and walked away. Her hope was fading, but her will was not. That evening she sat on the side of the road and looked at the lights far away. "Dad, you always said I can do anything." "I'll prove you right," she said softly. Next morning she went to an old neighbor's house to ask for help. Mrs. Patterson, who once smiled warmly at her, now looked uncomfortable. "Oh, Emily, I wish I could help. My husband wouldn't like it." Emily smiled politely. "It's okay. I understand." She turned and walked away with tears in her eyes. By the third day she was weak. A guard at a building saw her sitting outside. "Hey, you can't stay here." She nodded and moved. She had no direction left, only faith that something good would come. A night she sat under a streetlight counting the little coins left. She whispered, "Just one chance. That's all I need." The next morning she saw a tall building with a big sign, Coal Enterprises. People in suits walked in and out. She thought, maybe this is my chance. She walked inside and stood near the reception desk. "Excuse me, can I speak to someone about a job?" The lady behind the counter frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" Emily shook her head. "No, ma'am. I just need work. Any work. We don't take walk-ins," the lady said and looked away. Emily felt her throat close. She turned to leave. That's when the elevator opened. A man in a gray suit stepped out, talking to someone on the phone. His voice was deep, confident. He noticed Emily and stopped walking. "Who's this?" he asked. "She came for a job," the receptionist said quickly. The man looked at Emily's tired face. "What's your name?" "Emily Carter," she said softly. He nodded once. "Hire her as my assistant." The receptionist looked shocked. "Sir, she has no experience," the man said calmly. "Then she'll learn. Everyone starts somewhere." Emily blinked. "Sir, thank you." He smiled slightly. "You start tomorrow. My name is Justin Cole." That one moment changed her world. She left the building, holding the small paper that confirmed her job. She couldn't stop smiling. She bought a sandwich, sat on a bench, and whispered, "Mom, Dad, I did it." That evening she found a tiny room for rent. The walls were cracked, but it was safe. She placed her mother's photo on the table and said, "We have a home again." The next morning she put on her only clean dress and walked to the company early. Her heart was racing, but she felt proud. At the front desk the same lady now smiled politely. "Mr. Cole is expecting you." Justin's office was big and bright. He looked at her and said, "Welcome, Emily. I hope you're ready to work hard." "I am, sir," she said quickly. He smiled faintly. "Good. Honesty matters more than experience." Emily worked all day. She carried files, made coffee, and wrote notes. Everyone watched her quietly. Some whispered that the boss was giving her too much attention. Emily ignored them. She didn't care about gossip. She cared about earning her own bread. When she returned to her room that night, she looked at the small envelope with her first advanced payment. It wasn't much, but to her it felt like gold. She held it close and whispered, "I'm safe now." But deep inside a small voice said, "You don't know what this job will bring." Emily brushed the thought away. She was happy for the first time in months. She believed that kindness and hard work could change everything. She didn't know that sometimes life hides storms behind smiles. And far away in his big house, Justin looked at her file again and smiled in silence. Emily Carter, he whispered to himself. You're special. That night she slept peacefully, unaware that her life was about to twist again. Join our membership for exclusive English stories. Chapter 3. The Door That Opened. Emily reached the company before anyone else. Her hands were shaking, but her heart felt strong. She looked at her desk and whispered, "Don't fail again." Justin Cole entered the office with quiet confidence. He looked at her and said, "Good morning, Emily." She stood quickly. "Good morning, sir." He smiled. "You came early. That's a good sign." She worked with full focus. She took calls, arranged papers, and wrote reports even though she had never done this before. When she made mistakes, she apologized fast. Justin didn't shout. He said calmly, "It's fine. Learn from it." His soft voice made her believe she could actually build a new life. Days passed. Emily became better at her job. She never complained about extra work. Some coworkers were kind, but others looked at her with jealousy. They whispered, "Boss gives her too much attention." Emily heard it once and felt hurt. That evening she told herself, "I'll prove them wrong through my work." One afternoon she forgot to eat lunch. Justin noticed and walked to her desk. "Did you eat?" he asked. She smiled tiredly. "Not yet," he said. "Come to my cabin. There's food." She hesitated. "It's fine, sir," he said softly. "You'll faint if you keep skipping meals." She followed him inside. There was a small lunchbox on his table. He gave her half and said, "I don't like eating alone." Emily felt awkward but touched. She took a small bite and said quietly, "Thank you." He smiled. "Don't thank me. Just eat." That small kindness made her day. For the first time in months she felt seen. After work, Justin offered her a ride home. She refused politely. "I can walk, sir," he said. "It's late. I'll drop you." No discussion. She sat in the car silently. Justin asked, "You live alone?" She nodded. "Yes." He looked at her. "That's brave." She said softly, "It's not bravery, sir. It's need." He didn't speak again, but his eyes stayed thoughtful. Next morning, Emily found a small note on her desk. "Good work yesterday." She smiled and whispered, "He believes in me." Justin started giving her more responsibility. He asked her to handle meetings and prepare reports. One day, when a client praised her, Justin said proudly, "She's my best assistant." Emily blushed. But behind that smile, she was careful. She didn't want to depend on anyone again. Still, Justin's presence made her heart feel strange. Weeks passed. One evening the office was empty. Rain started outside. Justin walked to her desk and said, "Still here? I just wanted to finish this file," she said. He nodded. "You remind me of myself when I was young. Always trying too hard." She laughed softly. "Maybe because I have nothing left to lose." He looked into her eyes for a moment and said, "You'll never lose again. Not if I can help it." His words touched her heart more than she wanted to admit. Later that night, when she reached her room, she found a small package on the table. It had no name. Inside was a silver bracelet and a short note for your hard work. She guessed it was from Justin. She smiled but also felt nervous. She whispered, "Why does this feel too kind?" The next day she went to thank him. "Sir, did you send this?" He said calmly, "Does it matter who sent it?" She said, "It's beautiful, but I can't take gifts." He smiled. "It's not a gift. It's appreciation. You deserve it." She didn't argue. She just said, "Thank you, sir," and walked away with mixed feelings. That evening she called her old friend, Ryan, after months. He answered coldly. "You remember me now?" she said softly. "I got a job. I'm trying to start again," he replied. "Just don't forget who you were." She whispered, "I'm still the same girl, Ryan." He said, "I hope so," and ended the call. Emily sat in silence for a long time. Then she looked at the bracelet and said, "Maybe this time life won't hurt me again." Justin, sitting in his house miles away, was thinking about her too. He looked at her name in his phone and smiled slightly. "You're special, Emily." "I don't know why." The next morning he told her, "I want you to travel with me for a client meeting tomorrow." "Can you?" she said nervously. "Yes, sir," he replied. "Good. You'll learn a lot." She didn't know that this trip would change everything. Emily went home that night, looked at her mother's photo and whispered, "Maybe this door that opened will finally lead to peace." She didn't know that behind that same door danger was waiting quietly. Send us a super thanks to support our work. It really helps us keep writing more emotional English stories. Chapter 4. His smile. My mistake. Emily woke early the next morning and got ready for the business trip. Her hands were cold while she folded her files. She kept whispering to herself that everything would be fine. When Justin's car stopped near her, she smiled weakly and sat inside. He looked at her for a second and said, "She worked too hard for someone so young." She said softly that work kept her alive. He nodded and said, "Maybe that's why you remind me of my younger self." She didn't know why, but those words touched her heart. During the meeting she tried her best to hide her fear. She took notes, spoke clearly, and followed every instruction. Justin watched her from across the table and looked proud. When it ended, he said, in front of everyone, that she was the reason the deal went smoothly. The team clapped. Emily felt a small spark of pride after many empty months. That night Justin invited her for dinner. She refused at first because she didn't want people to talk. He smiled and said, "They will talk anyway. At least let them talk for something good." His tone was soft, almost caring. So she agreed. Over dinner he spoke about his past. He said he once had nothing and that people only stood near him when success arrived. She told him quietly that money showed who was real and who was fake. He smiled again and said, "You understand pain, Emily." When he dropped her later, he said she had brought light back into his life. She stood silent at her door and whispered only, "Good night." But her heart beat fast until morning. Days started changing after that. Justin began to care too much. He called to ask if she had eaten. He brought coffee to her desk. He complimented her work in front of everyone. People in the office whispered, but Emily kept silent. She didn't want trouble. Still, she felt something changing inside her. One evening he said softly, "Don't listen to them. They don't see your soul." She looked down and said, "You trust me too easily." He smiled and said, "Maybe I should." That smile followed her home. That same night she tried calling Ryan. His voice sounded different, cold and distant. He said he saw her photo beside her boss at a business event. She told him it was only work. He replied that work was taking her away from the person she once was. She cried quietly after the call. The next day Justin noticed her red eyes. He asked who made her cry. She said, "No one." He said, "You deserve peace, not pain." The way he said it made her believe he meant it. A few days later, her landlord shouted at her for unpaid rent. She had no money left. That evening she sat on her bed, holding her mother's picture, whispering that she was tired of being strong. The next morning Justin called her in and handed her an envelope. He said it was advance salary. She said she couldn't take it. He said she could, because he believed in her. When she thanked him, he told her not to call him sir anymore. Just, he said gently. For the first time she said his name, and it felt strange and warm at once. From that day their bond grew quietly. Sometimes he stood near her desk longer than needed. Sometimes their eyes met, and both looked away. One evening while they were alone he said, "I can't stop thinking about you." She froze and said, "You shouldn't say that." He whispered, "But it's true." She left the room without looking back, her heart racing. That night she told herself she would stay professional, yet she couldn't erase his face from her mind. Then came the moment that changed everything. After a late meeting, Justin said he wanted to talk. His voice was serious. He said, "Emily, I don't want to see you struggle anymore. Marry me." She stared at him, unable to speak. He said again, "I can give you safety, a home, a peaceful life." She asked quietly, "Why me?" He said, "Because you make me feel alive again." His eyes were calm and she believed him. For a second. When she went home that night she cried for hours. She told herself it was madness, but she also remembered hunger, fear, and loneliness. The world had taken too much from her already. She said softly to the picture on her wall, "Maybe peace is also a kind of love." 3 days later she said yes. Not out of love, but out of hope for a life without fear. She had no idea that this yes would one day destroy every piece of peace she was trying to find. Send a super thanks if this story touched your heart. It helps us keep creating more emotional English stories. Chapter 5. The Proposal I Should Have Refused. The day Emily said yes, she didn't sleep. She kept walking around her room, trying to convince herself she had done the right thing. She whispered that maybe peace mattered more than love. Maybe a roof and a meal could fix the pieces of her life that pain had broken. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to feel safe again. Justin called the next morning and said softly, "You made me happy." She said she was scared. He replied that life would be easier now. He promised she would never cry again. His voice was calm, confident, and full of control. Emily said quietly, "I hope this time someone keeps a promise." The wedding was simple. A private ceremony in Las Vegas. No family, no friends, no music, just two people signing a paper that would change everything. Justin held her hand and said, "You'll never be alone again." She smiled, faintly, hiding the emptiness inside her. That night in the car she looked out the window and whispered, "Mom, I did it. I finally have a home." The first few months passed peacefully. Emily had new clothes, a house bigger than she had ever seen, and food she didn't have to worry about. Justin bought her gifts, jewelry, and flowers. He said she looked perfect in every color. She smiled and thanked him, but her heart didn't feel full. She still woke at night thinking of her parents. She sometimes dreamed of Ryan's voice calling her name. Justin grew busier with work. He returned home late and stopped asking about her day. When she tried to talk, he said, "Not now. I'm tired." The warmth that once lived in his words slowly turned into silence. Emily started to spend her days alone. She told herself it was normal. She was rich now. She had no right to complain. But when the nights grew quiet, she realized she was rich in things, poor in peace. One evening while arranging his books, she found an old envelope with a woman's name on it, Laura Cole. Her hands shook. She opened it and saw a photograph. Justin was standing beside another woman, smiling. The date below said 2015. Her breath stopped. She waited all night for him to return. When he walked in, she asked softly, "Who is Laura?" Justin froze for a moment and then said calmly, "She's my past." She asked again, "Your past or your wife?" He shouted suddenly, "Stop asking questions. You don't need to know." Emily's heart broke in seconds. She said, "You lied to me." He turned away and said coldly, "I gave you everything. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her tears fell fast. "I wanted peace, not a lie." The next morning, newspapers carried the news. Businessman Justin Cole's secret marriage exposed. People whispered her name like poison. Reporters came to the gate shouting questions. His real wife Laura filed a case accusing Emily of trapping her husband. Emily couldn't believe what was happening. She begged Justin to speak the truth. "Tell them you lied to me," she cried. He looked away and said nothing. When the court day arrived, she sat alone in the corner. Reporters clicked her pictures. Laura walked in with anger in her eyes. Justin stood beside his lawyer and said in a cold voice, "She used me for money." Emily felt her heart stop again. "That's not true," she shouted, but nobody cared. She had no proof, no voice, no one to stand beside her. Everything, the house, the jewelry, the comfort, was all under Laura's name. Within minutes she lost it all. When it ended, Justin didn't even look at her. He walked out with Laura while the guards asked Emily to leave the court. She walked out with her small purse and trembling hands. Her world had ended once again. Outside, the same reporters shouted, but she didn't hear a word. She just kept walking until her legs gave up. That night she sat on the same bench where she had once slept when she was homeless. The wind felt cold again. She held her mother's picture and whispered, "I married my boss for peace and lost myself again." Her tears fell on the photo and she didn't bother to wipe them. The next morning she decided to disappear from that city. She took the cheapest bus and left everything behind. When the sun rose, she looked out of the window and said softly, "Maybe life is giving me one more chance to start again." She didn't know what waited ahead, but at least now she had nothing left to lose. Join our membership for exclusive English stories and emotional life lessons. Chapter 6. The Locked Room. Emily left the city that day with only her bag and her broken heart. She sat on the bus with her eyes closed and tried not to think. Every mile that passed felt heavy. She had nothing now. The girl who once believed in dreams was again running from shame. She whispered to herself that she would never trust anyone again. But pain has its own strange way of staying. Even silence carries memories. Days turned into weeks. Emily found a small job in another town, at a local store. She kept her head down and worked quietly. Nobody knew her past. At night she slept little. She often woke up crying without sound. She missed her parents. She missed Ryan. But most of all, she missed the version of herself who believed that kindness still existed. One evening while leaving work, she saw a newspaper on the counter. Justin's photo was printed on the front page. The headline said, "Businessman's wife files for divorce." She stood still for a long time. Her hands shook. She couldn't understand if it was anger or pity that she felt. She whispered, "Now you know what it feels like to lose everything." She folded the paper and threw it away, but her mind kept thinking about him. That night, she sat alone on her bed and said softly, "Why did I let him break me twice?" The air felt cold and still for the first time. She didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling until sleep came. A few days later, someone knocked on her door. When she opened it, she saw a delivery man holding a box. "From Mr. Cole," he said. She froze. Inside was a letter and a small key. The letter read, "I know you hate me, but I need to see you once. I owe you truth. Come to our house. The key will open the room you were never allowed to enter." Her hands trembled. She wanted to tear the letter, but her heart said, "Go. End it." The next morning she traveled back. Every turn of the road felt like walking into her past. When she reached the gate, the mansion looked empty. She used the key and stepped inside. Everything was quiet. She walked to the locked room, the one she had once been told to stay away from. She opened it slowly. Inside were boxes full of photos, letters and files. On the wall was a frame, her own picture. From the office. She gasped. Justin had kept her photo there beside another woman's, Laura's. There were papers showing business losses, court papers, and one notebook full of words written in his hand. It said, "I wanted peace. I ruined her to protect myself." Tears filled Emily's eyes. For a moment, she forgot her anger. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell the truth before it was too late?" Behind her, a voice said softly, "Because I was a coward." She turned and saw Justin standing in the doorway. He looked older, tired, almost broken. He said quietly, "Laura left. The company is gone. I have nothing left but guilt." Emily didn't move. He took a step closer and said, "You were the only person who saw me as human." She replied, "Then why did you destroy me?" He said, "Because I was afraid. I thought money could control everything." She said, "You used my pain for your comfort." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'll never forgive myself." For a long time no one spoke. Then he said, "This house will be sold soon. You can take whatever is yours." She looked around and said softly, "There's nothing here for me anymore." She walked past him toward the door. He said, "Emily, wait. I want to help you. Let me give you money." She stopped and said without turning, "You already gave me something. You gave me reason never to trust the wrong heart again." Then she walked out. Outside the gate, she felt light for the first time in years. She knew the past could not be erased, but she had faced it. She took a bus back to the small town and sat by the window watching the sunrise. She said quietly, "Mom, I'm not broken anymore. I'm free." The next morning she visited a community school and asked if they needed help. The principal smiled and said they always needed kind people. Emily started working there. She helped children read, tied their shoelaces, and listened to their small stories. Their laughter healed her heart more than time ever could. Each day she felt alive again. One afternoon while walking home, she saw a familiar face playing guitar near the park. It was Ryan. He looked older but still gentle. She stood there silently. He saw her and stopped playing for a few seconds. Neither moved. Then he smiled softly and said, "You came back." She nodded with tears in her eyes. "I lost everything," she whispered. He said, "Then you finally understand me." She sat beside him and they talked for hours. She told him everything. He listened without judging. At last she said, "I don't deserve forgiveness." He looked at her and said, "Maybe we both deserve peace." That sentence broke every wall she had built inside. She cried and he held her hand quietly. The pain slowly started to fade. Months passed. Emily and Ryan worked simple jobs and shared simple joys. They didn't have much, but they had peace. Sometimes at night she thought of Justin and prayed he would also find forgiveness somewhere. Her life had come full circle. From loss to lies, from fear to freedom. She finally understood what her father once told her. Real peace doesn't live in rich houses. It lives in honest hearts. She looked up at the sky one evening and whispered, "I'm home now." Send a super thanks if this chapter touched your heart. Your support helps us keep creating emotional English stories. Chapter 7. The fall and the farewell. Months passed, and peace slowly returned to Emily's life. She and Ryan lived in a small, rented room, and every morning began with laughter instead of fear. She cooked breakfast. He played soft music on his guitar. They had little money, yet every meal felt rich because it was shared. Sometimes Emily would stop in the middle of a song and whisper, "I never knew quiet could feel so warm." Ryan smiled and said, "That's because It's honest now. Emily worked at the school with joy. The children called her Miss Emily and ran to hug her every morning. Their tiny arms and pure smiles healed something deep inside her. At night she often wrote small notes in her diary, short prayers for her parents and sometimes for Justin. She no longer hated him. She only pied him. She knew hate would keep her tied to the past. Forgiveness was her way of saying goodbye. One evening Ryan returned home. He said quietly, "You should read this." The headline said, "Businessman Justin Cole hospitalized after heart stroke." Emily read the words again and again. Her fingers trembled but her heart stayed calm. Ryan watched her and asked, "Do you want to see him?" She closed her eyes for a moment. "No," she said. "He already saw who I was. I hope he now sees who he became." Later that night she sat near the window and whispered to the wind, "I forgive you, Justin. I forgive you so I can finally breathe." For the first time in years she felt light. A few weeks later news came that Justin had died. No family, no one to mourn. Emily didn't cry. She only said softly, "May he find the peace he never gave." Ryan held her hand and said, "You already found yours." She nodded and whispered, "Yes." But peace came after pain. Days moved gently. Emily saved a little from her salary and opened a small learning corner in the park. Poor children came to read and eat snacks she bought from her pay. Ryan helped buy, singing to them. Life had turned simple again. When people asked if she was happy, she smiled and said, "Happiness is not a place. It's a choice." That evening she walked home beside Ryan. He looked at her and said, "You've changed." She laughed softly, finally for the right reason. They both stopped for a moment. The sunset covered the sky like gold. She said, "I thought I lost everything, but life was just cleaning space for better things." He replied, "And love that stays is the best of all." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Emily looked at the sky and whispered, "Goodbye to the past. I won't look back anymore." In that silence her heart finally understood what peace truly meant. It wasn't in wealth or luxury or a house. It was right here in a heart that had learned to forgive. Join our membership for more emotional English stories. Chapter 8. The Peace I Paid for Years. Later, Emily stood in the same park where she once taught children. The air was filled with laughter and soft music from Ryan's guitar. Her life had become simple, yet her heart was full. She watched the children run toward her with small notebooks calling her name with joy. She smiled and said, "One at a time, little ones." Her voice was calm now, free from fear and hurry. Ryan walked closer and handed her a small flower. "Another student gave this to me," he said. She took it gently and smiled. "Maybe they are learning to share love, not just words." He nodded and said, "Just like you did." She looked up at him and said softly, "Took me too long to learn. But I'm glad I finally did." That evening they sat together under the orange sky. Emily said, "Do you ever think about the past?" Ryan nodded. "Sometimes. But I only think of it to thank it. Without it we wouldn't be here." She smiled and said, "You're right. Pain brought me home." Her eyes turned wet but her voice stayed peaceful. "I married my boss for money once," she said quietly. "But now I know peace was the real fortune." Ryan held her hand and said, "And love was the price." She looked at him for a long time and whispered, "A price worth paying." They both laughed softly. It was the kind of laughter that came from old wounds finally healed. As months passed, Emily's story spread. In the town, people came to see the woman who turned pain into kindness. Some brought letters. Some brought gifts. But she always said the same line. With a smile, "Don't give me things. Give love to someone who needs it more." One afternoon a little girl asked her, "Miss Emily, were you ever sad?" Emily looked at her and said, But sadness taught me how strong a heart can be. The girl hugged her tightly, and in that moment Emily felt her parents near again. She whispered, "Mom, Dad, your daughter kept her promise." That night, she sat by the window beside Ryan. They watched the stars quietly. He said, "You still wear that old bracelet?" She looked at it and smiled. "Yes, it reminds me how far I've come." He asked, "Do you regret anything?" She shook her head slowly. "No. Everything that broke me built me." Ryan placed his arm around her and said, "We're not rich, but we're complete." She smiled softly, and that's enough. Her voice carried peace and her eyes held the light of forgiveness. Before sleeping, she wrote one last line in her diary. "Money gave me walls. Love gave me wings." Then she closed it gently and said, "I'm finally home." Send a super thanks if this story touched your heart. Your support helps us write more emotional English stories. The end.